Monsta Creepypasta.
3 scary horror stories that you told me. You told me about that night, the one you'd never forget. The night you walked into the barn and saw it. I still remember the look in your eyes when you described it, like you were trying not to relive it, but couldn't help yourself. You said the first thing you noticed was the smell. It wasn't manure or the dampness of hay. This was sharp, metallic, like blood mixed with something rotten. You smelled death before, you said, but this was different. It clung to the air, made it hard to breathe. You thought maybe a fox or coyote had gotten into the barn again. That's what you told yourself, over and over. Just some animal that got too brave. But when you opened the barn door, that's when you saw something not normal. You said the light from your lantern barely lit up the inside, but you could see enough. The stalls were empty, except for the bodies. Your chickens were scattered, torn apart, like someone had taken a knife to them for fun. Your prize cow, Loretta, was slumped against the far wall, her throat ripped clean out, her eyes wide, like she died in pure terror. Then you saw the footprints. They were too big to be a man's, too clawed to be a dog's. They were deep, pressed into the dirt like whatever made them weighed more than any animal you'd ever seen. You thought it was a bear at first, but then you heard it. That sound, the one you said you'll never forget. A low, wet growl, like a predator savoring the moment before it strikes. You said you turned slowly, your lantern shaking in your hand, and that's when you seen it in the corner. At first, you thought it was just a shadow, but then it moved. It was crouched low, too tall to stand under the barn ceiling, but hunched in a way that made it look unnatural, like it didn't belong in this world. Its skin, if you could call it skin, was slick and black, like oil. Its limbs were long, stretched out, ending in claws that glinted in the lantern light. But the worst part, you said, was the face. It didn't have eyes, at least not like ours. Just hollow sockets that seemed to evaporate the light, leaving nothing but darkness. Its mouth, oh my, you said its mouth stretched far too wide, full of jagged teeth that looked more like shards of broken glass than anything natural. You told me it didn't move at first, it just stared at you, if something without eyes can stare, like it was deciding whether or not to kill you then and there, or to let you run first. You said you couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and then it smiled. You claimed it smiled. That's when you bolted, almost tripping a few times as you made your escape. But you did drop the lantern and ran as fast as your legs could carry you. You told me you didn't even look back, not until you were inside the house, locking the door behind you. You said you could hear it outside, later that night, scratching the walls, dragging its claws along the wood like it was playing with you. The animals were all gone by morning, no bodies this time, just blood everywhere. You never found out what it was or what it could be, but you told me it kept coming back, always at night, always taking something, until the farm wasn't worth keeping anymore. You left everything behind, your home, your livelihood, because of that thing. And now, as you sit here telling me this story that I'm telling to you, you swear you still hear it sometimes, late at night, when the wind is blowing just right. The sound of claws scratching the walls makes you cover your head in your blanket at night. You told me about the night you walked down the street, and I still don't know how you made it out alive. You said you hadn't thought much of it at first, just another late night walking home after your shift. You were tired, your feet aching, and the only sound was the clack of your shoes on the pavement. But then you noticed how quiet it was. Too quiet. No crickets, no rustling leaves, not even the sounds of distant traffic, just the sound of your breathing, growing quicker with each step. You told me the streetlights weren't working, that the darkness felt thick, like it was pressing against you, suffocating you, and then you began hearing the shuffle of footsteps behind you. You said you turned, but there was nothing there, just shadows laying across the backcountry road, stretching longer than they should. You laughed it off at first, told yourself it was just your imagination, but then you heard the shuffling again, closer this time. You said your heart started pounding, your hands shaking, but you kept walking, faster now. You didn't want to run, didn't want to look scared, but then you saw something that made your blood run cold. You said it was standing at the end of the street, silhouetted against the dim glow of the moon, too tall to be human, too hunched to be anything else. Its arms were too long, almost dragging on the ground, and its head tilted at an impossible angle, like it was studying you. You told me you couldn't make out its face, but the way it moved, oh God, you said it moved like it wasn't used to its body, like its joints bent the wrong way, snapping and popping with each step as it came closer. You said you froze, couldn't even scream, just stood there as it got closer. You said you froze, couldn't even scream, just stood there as it got closer to you. You thought it might have been a witch, its hunched frame, the way its fingers curled like claws. But then you saw its mouth. It grinned at you, disturbingly. Teeth too sharp, too many, gleaming in the faint light. Its tongue flicked out, long and black, tasting the air like a snake. And then it laughed. You said the sound was the worst part. It wasn't a human laugh, not really. It was high-pitched, wet, like nails scraping against metal and a drowning animal all at once. It echoed down the empty street, making your skin crawl. That's when you ran, faster than you ever have. You didn't look back, not until you heard it, the scraping, its claws, dragging along the concrete as it chased you. You said it didn't run, not exactly. It loped, its limbs moving in a way that didn't make sense, faster than it should have been. You told me you turned down a different road, hoping to lose it, but that's when you heard it breathing, loud, wheezing gasps, like it was right behind you. You swore you could feel its breath on your neck, hot and rancid, as you ran. You don't remember how you got into town, but you found yourself there. Suddenly there were lights, cars, people, and it was gone, like it had vanished into the night. But you told me it wasn't over. You said you still see it sometimes, out of the corner of your eye, when you're alone. That grin, those teeth watching you from the dark. And when the streetlights flicker, that's when you know it's close. You told me about the night you and your friend dared each other to go into that building. I don't know how you managed to tell me without breaking down. It still haunts me just hearing it. It was supposed to be harmless, wasn't it? Just a dumb dare. The old building had been abandoned for years, its windows boarded up, the front door hanging on by rusted hinges. You said you both laughed about each other being scared, trying to act tough as you climbed over the broken gate. Inside, it was silent, the kind of silence that presses on your ears. Dust hung in the air, and every step you took echoed, louder than it should have. You told me you explored for a while, finding broken furniture, peeling wallpaper, and empty rooms that felt wrong. Somehow, like you weren't supposed to be there. Then you saw the blood. You said it was a thin trail smeared across the cracked tiles, leading to a door at the far end of the hallway. You didn't want to follow it. You told me. You tried to convince your friend to leave, but he just laughed it off, said it was probably paint or a prank. You didn't believe that, but you followed him anyway. The door that led to a staircase descending into the basement. You said it was colder down there, so cold you could see your breath, even though it was in the middle of summer. The blood trail was thicker now, pulling in streaks on the concrete steps. You told me every instinct you had was screaming at you to turn back. You begged your friend to stop, but he just kept going, his flashlight bouncing off the damp, crumbling walls. You didn't want to leave him alone, so you followed, even though your legs felt heavy, like your body was trying to stop you. At the bottom of the stairs, the trail ended in a wide, dark puddle in the middle of the floor. You said the smell hit you first, like rust and damp earth. Your friend stopped, finally looking nervous, and you both shined your flashlights around, trying to figure out what could have caused it. That's when you saw her. You said she was crouched in the far corner, her back to you. At first, you thought she was just a little girl, maybe homeless or lost. Her hair hung in tangled clumps, and she was wearing a filthy dress, torn and stained. Your friend whispered something. You couldn't remember what. Just as both of you shined your flashlights on her, that's when she turned. Her face, you couldn't describe it fully, could you? Just that her eyes were too large, too black. Her mouth was weird, stretching wide. Her teeth was like that of a panther. And then she growled at you. You told me she was holding a rabbit. It wasn't a stuffed animal. It was real, small, furry, and barely recognizable. She lowered her body to the floor and just watched you for a moment, like she was curious about the two of you. Then she slung the rabbit on the floor, causing a wet thud sound. You said she stood up then, slowly, her limbs jerking like a puppet on a string. Her eyes never left you guys. Then she started to move forward, her bare feet slapping against the concrete. That's when you ran. You grabbed your friend and you bolted up the stairs, not looking back once, not even when you heard the screaming. You said it wasn't a child scream. Not really. It was deeper, in a way that made your chest tighten, like it was inside your head. When you got outside, you didn't stop running until you were halfway down the block. Your friend swore he saw her standing in the window, watching you leave. You never went back, but you told me sometimes, late at night, you can still hear the screaming in your head.